Hi guys, Jake here. Welcome to the whiteboard sessions. Whiteboard session number 1. We're going to go and do a bit of a deep dive into some music theory and ultimately learn how to apply that to our instrument from this point of view, from this channel's point of view. That's going to be our guitar. We may end up talking a lot about a piano because I think it's really visual and how we take those notes and put them onto an instrument, but ultimately it will come down to the guitar. But I think before we get onto anything like that, we just need to look at it right from the basic, right from what is music, what are the notes involved, how do we use those, how do we manipulate them. We're going to learn some formula to build some chords and see where we can go from there. So, let's make a start. Okay, so music as we know it in the West here is going to be divided into 12 notes. The musical alphabet we'd call that, alright? Now let's think about the normal alphabet going A through to X, Y, Z, and what we're going to do is start from A, stop at G. I've done a diagram up here to start us off, so we're starting with an A, coming to a G, and that will start us back around at A. Now you'll notice we've got everything in between as well, so these, our sharps or our flats, would be our black notes on a piano. Again, talking about that piano because it's easy to visualise. On a guitar it's just fret numbers to us, it doesn't really matter, does it? So what we've got is an A, through to G, starting again on the A, with sharps and flats in between where they forms 12 notes. That's my 13 there, coming back to number 1, coming back around again, okay? And what we do with music is we tend to break it up into smaller sections to build scales. So what we're going to talk about is our major scale. It's the most popular thing that's used at first. The C major scale, for example, is every white note on a piano, on a keyboard. So that's why it's a really good point of view to take. We haven't got to deal with any of the sharps or flats at first, and it's easy to visualise. Again, on a guitar, slightly different. We just learn a template and move it around, okay? So if we start with the key of C, let's take a look at this. I'm going to take my C, and we're going to call that number 1, okay? Now, I'm now going to just write out my musical alphabet coming back to a C. So that's going to give us a C and a D. I'm avoiding my sharps and flats, you'll notice. A C, a D, an E, an F, a G, back round to A, D, and C again, okay? Hope you're all having a good laugh at my handwriting. And what that gives us there is a C major scale. No sharps or flats, white notes on the piano. So first thing to address is why haven't we got any of the notes in between? Because when we take a major scale, we use a particular format or a particular formula to determine what a major scale is. And this is just the way it's been in Western music since the beginning of musical time. And what that formula is, I will use with T's and S's. We go tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Okay, so to understand that further, let's take a look back at the top here. Everything you see here is working in semitones. Okay, so an A through to an A sharp or a B flat is a movement of a semitone. Okay, so if I wanted to jump from A straight to B, that would become a tone. Okay, so that's how we move throughout these notes. What we've done is we've taken C, we want to start on C, and we're going to work through that using this template of tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone to create a major scale. Okay, so C will be a full tonal jump to a D, D is a full tone jump to an E, and then we have a semitone which takes us E straight to F. We don't have a sharp or a flat in between an E and an F, there's no black note on a piano if you want to visualise it. And we're then going to go from our F to a G is a full tone jump, as you can see. Another tone, G through to A, and that A to B, come back round to the beginning there, we're on our B, and a semitone movement is going to take us back to our C here, okay? Giving us our C major scale. And then we're going to number it. So we'll number the scale, and this is quite important. I think this is really important because this is what we'll use from now on to create our formula for chords, arpeggios, scales, etc. And using the numbers means that we could be playing X, Y, Z, we could be playing in the key of C, B, G, whatever, it doesn't matter. If we use the numbers for a template, we can apply it to any key. So let's just go ahead straight away and just add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to add an 8 on the end there. 8 is the same as our 1, it's our tonic, it's our root, okay? And we're going to come to know these numbers in a much better way throughout this exercise now, okay? So, what we have there is the C major scale. numbers 1 through to 7, back onto 8, and it will continue after that. We do get onto 9s, 11s and 13s later, but we'll deal with that in a later session. What I want to do with this today is to learn how we can take notes and structure from that scale to build chords. We're just going to learn some chord formula today, and then what I think I want you guys to do in your own time is to then look at how that relates to your instrument, namely guitar from this channel, I'm assuming, but that's what's important, because from there you can then start to add and play more interesting chords. Okay, let's make a start on that. Okay, so let's start to learn some formula. Let's start to understand how we can take the scale, take it apart, and create chords from it. And from that, later, arpeggios, modes, scales, etc. Okay, this is the building blocks of everything, is what I tell everyone. This is another reason why I go on a lot about the major scale and say how important it is. If we really understand it, from it we can build everything. But you can't just have the major scale and work with that. We do need this formula. So let's work like this. If I'm to build a major chord on guitar or piano, anything, I'm going to need to take 3 notes. So we call those triads. So first of all, we'll start working with our triads. Now, a triad is going to be a major chord or a minor chord, an augmented chord, a diminished chord. I'll write all these down later, and some sus chords as well. And any version of a chord with 3 notes, basically, okay? Now, every chord we're going to be playing, let's get to grips with this. We're going to need a 1, otherwise it doesn't exist. The 1 is the root, the tonic, the G, the C, the A, whatever, okay? And then everything that comes after is going to determine what type of chord it is. So, we're going to take this first triad, a major chord. So our major chord is going to equal a 1, a 3, and a 5. Now that's the most important thing you can take away from this session today. You take 1, 3, and 5 from your major scale of your root or your tonic or your chord, then you're going to build the major scale. Let's do that. Let's take the 1st, 3rd, and 5th degree of our major scale. 1, 3, and 5. That's going to give us a C, an E, and a G. Now if I pop those 3 notes together on a guitar or on a piano, nice and easy on a piano, 3 notes, little triad like that, you're going to come up with a major chord. Beautiful. It's simple, and as some of you may be aware, later on we can do lots of things with that by inverting these notes around in a different order. Okay, so 1, 3, and 5 builds our major chord. From that, let's build everything else. Okay, how can we manipulate this slightly? Let's start by adding our 1 back. We need that. That's our root to tell us I'm a chord. What type of chord am I going to become? Let's add that 5th back in. The 5th is a note we're going to learn. It's used to bulk. It's the note that, it's like the flour to the mix. It bulks the sound up, okay? If I have just these 2 together, that gives us a power chord or a 5th chord on a guitar or on any instrument, but we use them a lot, power chords on guitars. And I'm going to change my 3rd. If I want to create a minor chord, so let's think about that sad or melancholic sound, I need to just take my 3rd and I'm going to flatten it. If I flatten my 3rd in the key of C, let's take a look at what happens. First of all, let's take our 1 and our 5 again, our C and our G. And if we flatten our 3rd, 1, 2, 3, that's our E. Take a look up here, take our E, we're going to flatten it. That comes down a semitone to an E flat. So we're going to add an E flat into that. So that's going to be introducing a black note on a piano or on a guitar. We drop our 3rd, it gives us a different shape. Unfortunately on a guitar we need to do a bar chord for that mainly, so it's a little more tricky at first, but we'll get to know that. Okay, so we've got our major and minor chords. 1 through 5 for major, flatten a 3rd degree to give us a minor chord. 1 note difference makes that huge difference in sound and feeling, okay, so that's important. Okay, what else can we do with these then? Let's talk about some other triads. I can play a diminished chord. Not so popular at first, but it comes up, and when it does, it can be a real Achilles heel for people. Number 1, they're quite tricky to play. They're also quite hard to place. But if we think of this as, this is the 7th degree usually in a scale, it will come from the 7th chord. We'll get onto that later when we start to talk about harmony and harmonised scales and chord structures. So for now, a diminished chord, it's just another formula to us. We're going to work with the same premise of a triad, using our 1, 3, and 5, and what else we can do to manipulate that. Again, starting with our 1, we're going to add our 5 in, that's our flower, that's our bulk. Our 3rd, because that's what gives us our colour or our identity, and we're going to flatten that. A diminished chord is a minor chord, which is further diminished by adding a flattened 5 as well. It gives a real dissonant sound. Okay, so hopefully you can see so far what we've got is our true, original, the OG major chord, 1, 3, 5. We're messing with that slightly by flattening the 3rd, and we're now flattening the fifth to give us a diminished chord. Okay. There's one other I want to talk about right now before we start to push this on, which is going to be an augmented chord. Again, you don't see this come up so often in rock and pop. It's definitely there, but you'll see it more commonly in classical music or jazz. But if you've got it in your arsenal, you can use that as a nice little trick to catch people's ears. So let's just talk about the build-up of that. We're going to do something slightly different here. When we augment a chord, we're going to change it up. So we're going to change up our major chord. It's a major chord, so 1, 3, and 5. What we're going to do this time is we're going to sharpen our fifth degree. So it's a major chord, 1 and 3, with a sharp 5. That gives a real nice dissonance in there as well, wanting to resolve. So what would that give us? That would give us a C and an E, 1 and major third, and we're going to grab a G sharp now. Okay, again, introducing a black note. Didn't add it here, did I? Let's just pop back to here. So for our diminished chord, that's going to be a C, a minor third, that's an E flat, and a G flat to have a diminished or a flat 5. Okay, quick overview. Learn 1, 3, 5 for a major chord. You take 1, 3, and 5 from your given scale. Like I said, it could be X, Y, Z, it could be A, B, C, D. For now it's C. And we take 1, 3, 5, we build a triad. We start to manipulate that triad to create different, more interesting chords. We flatten the third, we get our minor chord. Flatten the third and the fifth, you get your diminished chord. Sharpen the 5, so going the other way, we're going to augment the chord. Now there's loads more we can do with this. Let's start to talk about 7s. Ooh. Okay, so in theory, adding a 7 to our chords on a whiteboard isn't going to be so tricky. There's a couple of rules we need to start to learn. It's not going to be as obvious what we've got to do. But on your instrument, it becomes a little more physically difficult because we're now adding in a fourth note to our chord. So instead of triads, we're now playing quadrads. 4 notes. So we're starting with our triad and adding to that. Let's think about it like that, okay? So going back to our original formula, let's build a major chord. We're going to add 1, 3, and 5. Let's keep in the key of C, so we'll add a C, E, and a G, okay? Now, I want to make this a major 7 chord now. So the way I've always learned this, the way I've understood is, if I'm told that something is just a C, or just a D, or whatever, that is a major chord. It's then specified if it's minor. So if I'm told C, I know that's a major chord, 1 through 5. If I'm now told I want a major 7 chord, let's apply it to C, a C major 7 chord, that means I'm going to break that into 2. Look, I need to build my C, like I've done above, 1, 3, 5, my major triad. And I need to add a major 7. So let's take the 7th degree, the 7th note of our major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's our B. So we add in a 7, we're going to get C, E, G, and our B is our major 7. It's a gorgeous chord on a piano, it's your triad, adding that extra note to the top, split that into 2 on a guitar. There's loads of different ways to voice these chords. Quite simple to play on a guitar at first, C major 7, because we can use our open B string. On that, what we'll do in the next session is start to take this theory and apply it to the neck of the guitar. So if you're sat at home thinking, how do I put this on my guitar? Give it a go, but I'll show you next time, okay? So that's our major 7 chord. We're starting to extend our triads to quadrads by adding that 7th note, that 7th degree, okay? What else can we do with that? Let's talk about dominant 7 chords. Now, dominant 7 chord, let's write it out. C, 7, or C 7th. Usually you'll just see the C7 part of that, okay? Now again, what that's telling me is, it's a C. That's a major chord to me, so I know I'm having 1, 3, and 5 in there for my major triad. Now let's deal with this 7th part here. We've just been told that if it's written major 7, I need to take the 7th from my major scale. That's what we did. We formed a beautiful major 7 chord. Now when I get just C7 or C7th, this is called a dominant 7, we're going to flatten that 7. Now there's no indication to why or how that should work from the name of the chord. This is where we just need to learn a couple of rules. So our C7, C7th or C dominant 7, we're going to add a flat 7th in there. Again, if you take a look, it's just one note difference. What are we going to get? We're going to get a C, an E, a G, and a B flat now. Okay, that one note different is going to add a really interesting sounding chord. It's used a lot for blues and jazz. It creates a little bit of tension. It also leaves it very open. Dominant 7 chords like this are used for key changes. It kind of lifts the key up in the air and then you can kind of start again. It's a good one for that. So C7 for a C7 chord, 1, 3, 5 major with a flat 7 on there, okay? Right, let's dive into some minor chords. So let's start with our minor triad. So we're going to look at just a minor chord. It's going to equal, we took a 1, a third, and a fifth, and we flatten in that third degree to make it minor, remember, okay? So the same theory is going to apply here, just with 1 or 2 rules again. Let's look at 3 or 4 chords here with this. So a minor chord, let's just put the notes in there as well for good practice. It's our C, E flat, and G. Okay, so let's do what we did before. We added a 7 into our chord, didn't we? We came up with 2 different versions of major 7 and a dominant 7. For this then, let's do the same thing. Let's go for a minor 7 chord. Do that, or just a small m and a 7. It's going to equal, again, let's break it down again. So if we call it a C minor, the instruction there is that it's a C minor. So I'm going to start with my minor triad, as we did before, but it wants a minor 7 in there as well. So what I want you to think with this is the rule that we can use is we need to add a minor 7, not a major 7, as is specified with the major 7 chord. So we're going to add our 7 and flatten that also, okay? You can think of it as the minor third is going to drag the 7 down with it, okay? But as specified in the name of the chord, it's a minor 7. Think of it like that. That's going to give us a C, an E flat, a G, and also that B flat as well, okay? Hoping that makes sense so far. Let's keep going with this. So why don't we used a diminished chord earlier, which was a major triad, but then we flattened the third and we flattened the fifth. Okay, so that gave us a minor chord with a flat 5. So we've got like a further diminished sound there, which gives us that diminished sound. Okay, so let's work with that, but we're going to add a quadrad to that, so we're going to add a 7. It's a minor chord. It's going to be called a C minor 7 flat 5. Now this is the best example I can give you of how the name of a chord is the instruction of what to do. So let's break this down. Okay, I'm hoping some of you that are watching this, if this is something you haven't done before, are starting to get a grip and maybe you could make this by yourself. If that's true, maybe pause the video, try and write down the formula that's involved with this, maybe the notes from the scale above as well. Okay, so a C minor 7 flat 5, we've got some instructions there, haven't we? We've got a C, that's our 1, let's think of it like that. We've got a minor chord, so we need to add a 3, flat 3, and a fifth in there, okay? And then what we've got now is a C minor 7 as above. We took the 7, the minor third dragged that down with it, so we're going to add a flat 7. What's happening next? We break that last part in there. It's asking us to flatten the fifth. A C minor 7 flat 5. So I'm going to take my fifth, I'm going to flatten that as well. Let's just take a look at what those notes would be then. Okay, so we'd have our C, our E flat, our G flat, and the B flat. So flattening a whole bunch of notes to have our minor 7 flat 5 chord. This again would be the 7th degree of a scale. We'll talk about that in future sessions. It's used to build up some tension before releasing back to chord 1 again. It's a great way to work music like that. So if any of you are also watching thinking, hang on a minute, you've told us that the C major scale has no sharps or flats in there, but as we're moving our chords around, we're adding in flats and sometimes a sharp with the augmented chord. Well, the answer is kind of in the question there, is that it's not a major chord anymore. So we're having to manipulate our major scale, just like we manipulate our chord formula to come up with different sounding chords, which we'll get onto later because we'll talk about how we can take the major scale and flatten or sharpen or move degrees of this to have different types of scales or modes when it gets into that. So there's loads we can dive into on this. That was our major triads, our minor triads, our diminished chords, our augmented chords, and we've even now added some 7s. I'm cautious that I don't want to go on too far with this because we're going to break this up into different sessions. So why don't we leave it at that? I'm going to give us a little overview on what I want you to take away from this one today. Okay? We've learned 12 notes there that build up music as we know it. Okay? And then how we're going to, I guess, manipulate those notes, move those notes, add different ones to them to form scales, chords, arpeggios, modes, etc. All we've done with this today is we've taken our 12 notes, we've started from a starting point of C, we've added the formula tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, and that spells out a major scale in any key from any starting point, okay? And we've taken that, we've numbered it, and we've decided that we come up with triads and quadrads. Quite simply put, triads are 3 notes, quadrads we're going to add to that. We can add further, obviously, and go back the other way and just have 2 notes of just harmony, okay? Then from there, we've created some formula that we need to build the chords. And I think if we learn that, and you can use those as your building blocks, then you can start to build anything. I want you to be able to look at any chord on a chord sheet or that someone says to you, and because you know this, you can steadily start to build up to playing those more complicated chords. That's the plan. Okay, so the formula we looked at today, we looked at a major chord. Let's write it as we go. Major chord equals 1, 3, 5. We're building on that constantly, aren't we? We've learned that if we want to play a minor chord, that's going to be a 1, 3 and a 5. We're flattening the third degree. It's going to make it sound minor. We learned that we can play a diminished chord, which if that's a new chord to you, is spectacular. It's used quite a lot, but if you use it sparingly or rarely, it will just give your playing a little edge and your songwriting a bit of an edge as well. That's where we're taking our third and flattening it to make it a minor chord, and we're going to flatten the fifth as well to make a diminished sound. We also looked at an augmented chord, which is where we take a major triad and we sharpen the fifth degree. So kind of think of the augmented as the opposite of diminished. If we're diminishing, we're having less, we're coming down, we're flattening. If we're sharpening, we're going up, we're augmenting and changing that note there, okay? This is an interesting chord, we'll look at that in more depth later on. Okay, then we looked at our minor 7 chords, and we came up with our major triads, 1, 3, and 5. I want a major 7 chord. You simply add the 7th chord of the scale onto that. If I want a dominant 7 or just a 7th chord, let's write Dom there so you got that down. It's going to be the same major triad, but we're adding in a flat 7. You can think of that flat 7 as a minor 7 if you wish, because it's coming down, and that's why this chord has quite an interesting sound, because it's essentially a major chord with a minor note in there as well, so it's a bit of a conflicting sound, I guess, okay? What do we are? We looked at a minor 7 chord, and what did we do? We took our 1, 3, 5, we flattened the third because we want that minor part of it, and we discussed that the 3 drags that 7, which it's asking for, down with it, so we flatten the 7 as well. Okay, minor 7 chord. Then this one here, which I said was the best example of how to use a chord name as an example or an instruction of how to build the chord. We looked at the minor 7, flat 5. Should have said this earlier. We also know that as our half diminished chord. I can just write that. But I can't spell. Half diminished. 3 different ways to write that there. Diminished would just be a circle. We're putting a line through it for a diminished 7, for a half diminished, sorry, or a half diminished chord. And that's going to give us, look, let's break it down again. It was 1, 3, 5, major triad, flatten the third, minor triad. Add the 7, it's asking for a 7, it's a minor chord, so we flatten the 7, and the further instruction there is to flat the 5 as well. Flat the 5, minor 7, flat 5. So, take this chord formula, take all of this, try yourselves to apply this to your guitar. I say guitar, could be any instrument obviously. I'm hoping that a lot of you already have enough knowledge to know some chords anyway, and that you'll start to do this in reverse order, and you'll look at the chords you play and go, ah yeah, that makes sense, that's obviously made from those chords there, and when I drop my one note there, that's me dropping the third to make a minor chord. It'll all start to work, and like I always say, I love those little eureka moments, or the, ah yeah. I want people saying, ah yeah. I do it all the time in music theory, still, and as I go further and further into it. So let's try and get that going, and what we'll do in the next session is we'll look at higher extensions, but also how to apply it with a guitar. I have a guitar with me as well when we're doing it. Thank you, whiteboard sessions number 1, out.